And greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace. No Todd Erzin today. He'll be back tomorrow. Aaron McIntyre here with me as well. We're brought to you by our friends over at Constitution Wealth. Now is the time, in the aftermath of a victorious election, take full advantage of the opportunity. Ask yourself, are you ready to secure the future of American values for generations to come? Do you know if your investments are aligned with the renewed promise we are now feeling in our great country? Well, we've turned a corner, but the work does not stop there. So don't let your retirement dollars support the very causes that have threatened our freedoms and way of life. Now is the time to use your shareholder proxy votes to keep woke companies accountable and ensure your investments match your principles. Most people don't realize they can make a difference. Mutual funds and ETFs often vote on your behalf, but that doesn't mean you can't take control. Let's keep pushing forward. Partnering with investment experts who share our values, you can continue shaping the future by reducing the hold things like ESG and DEI have on your financial portfolio. That's by letting Constitution Wealth be your ally, helping you protect everything that you stand for. So take action now. Visit constitutionwealth.com/blaze. Sign up for a free consultation today. That's constitutionwealth.com/blaze. Next hour on the show, I'm going to take an entire hour and we're going to kind of workshop a conversation here. Because I think in light of whom former President and now President-elect Donald Trump has selected to be his Surgeon General nominee, we are already seeing the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again movement. That's kind of the branding for the those that turned skepticism into political activism during this scandemic. We're kind of seeing, I think, that movement come to a crossroads already. And it's the same fork in the road that MAGA itself came to, that Christian conservatives, religious writers, whatever you want to call them, came to. It's the Tea Party came to. And I'm going to lay a few things out, and some of the things I laid out on social media over the weekend. And then we're going to go through and look at some of the contrarian replies to what I laid out on social media and respond to as many of those as we can as well, coming up in the very next hour of the show. Now, at the bottom of this hour, our good friend Bob Vander Plaats was at a conference this week with some movers and shakers and about where the right is now headed post-election. He'll have some thoughts on what he heard there that I think you'll want to hear. But let's get started as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by some good, some bad, and some head scratchers. Donald Trump, in a flurry of announcements late in the day on Friday, pretty much filled out the rest of his cabinet and sub-cabinet picks. Trump finally announced Scott Bessent to serve as Treasury Secretary. Bessent has faced criticism for his ties to George Soros. Trump also picked Russ Vought for the Office of Management and Budget. Vought previously served in the first Trump administration as Deputy OMB Director and then as Director. You'll recall during his Deputy Director confirmation hearing, Bernie Sanders accused Vought of Islamophobia for articulating Orthodox Christian views. Trump also nominated Lori Chavez DeRemer, a congresswoman from Oregon, as his labor secretary. Chavez DeRemer has opposed right-to-work efforts in the federal government, among other things. Teamsters Union President Sean O'Brien praised the pick. He picked Sebastian Gorka as senior advisor on counterterrorism. He also tapped Dr. Jeanette Nishewat as Surgeon General. Dr. Nishewat was, frankly, horrible on COVID. She is on record as pro-masking, pro-jab, and pro-booster, although in more recent years she's been more critical of the COVID jabs, particularly when it comes to children. He also picked former Congressman Dr. Dave Weldon for CDC director. In his announcement, Trump cited a lack of trust in the nation's health institutions and said Dr. Weldon would be a force for change. Dr. Weldon has long questioned the cause of autism and has been a medical doctor for 40 years. Trump also picked Dr. Marty Makary for head of the Food and Drug Administration. Dr. Makary, despite support for the COVID jabs, has been an outspoken critic of the country's unhealthy food supply and critic of the current establishment of public health professionals. Trump also tapped Scott Turner of Texas to lead housing and urban development, as well as Brooke Rollins, also of Texas, to lead the Department of Agriculture. So very much a mixed bag of picks to round out, for the most part, Trump's cabinet. By the way, in California, they're still counting votes, even as Trump has filled his cabinet. So there's that. Moving on, the deep state can't stop, won't stop. As Daniel Horowitz pointed out, the D.C. federal court is sentencing January 6ers at a breakneck pace. 21 were sentenced last week, plus 2 new trials. So-called journalist and Axios CEO Jim Vanderhei spoke at a gala over the weekend and freaked out over Elon Musk and X.
Everything everything we do is under fire. Elon Musk sits on Twitter every day, or X today, saying like, we are the media, you are the media. My message to Elon Musk is, bullshit. You're not the media. You having a blue check mark, a Twitter handle, and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter any more than me looking at your head and seeing that you have a brain and telling you have an awesome set of tools makes me a damn neurosurgeon.
And finally, fresh off of having to read 3 different legal notices on The View last week to avoid lawsuits from Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz, here's an oldie but a goodie from earlier this year when View host Sunny Hostin found out she's a descendant of slavers on the PBS show Finding Your Roots.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling, my friend?
I think it's actually pretty interesting that my husband and I have shared roots.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. And I think it's great for our children to know this information. I guess it's a fact of life that this is how some people made their living.
And that's what happened while we were away.
So as much as we love unintentional cell phones, like what Aaron just showed us with Sunny Hostin. Aaron, isn't it also true that everyone is a descendant of slaves and everyone's a descendant of slave owners, given how wide this practice has been in really since the dawn of human history?
Somehow, some way, yeah.
Everybody is. I mean, if you traced anyone's lineage back, you would be a slave. You'd be descendant of slaves and a descendant of slave owners, depending on how far back you could go. Given how widespread the practice of slavery has been, primarily as an economic means. Did I say exclusively as an economic means? Is that what I said? No, it was also a tool of oppression in ancient days too, but it was also in the era before industrial revolutions and middle-class lifestyles. It was also basically the way that we had labor forces in the world. And, more proto-nascent, primitive economic cultures prior to the modern era. So... okay, here's what I want to do. We're going to table the conversation about Trump's appointments over the weekend to next hour because it ties into what we're going to talk about next hour. Let me just briefly reset where I am coming from. And I laid all this out about a week or so ago. And it always throws me for a loop when I tell everybody exactly what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. And then in advance of doing so, and then when I proceed to do so, people lose it. Like I told people from the beginning, did I not? If Trump wins the nomination, I'm voting for him. Was there ever a point in time since the beginning of this election cycle where I did not stress that every time it came up? Every time. And then somehow, well, yeah, but now it's more enthused. So now the tenor of it, the tenor, the tone of what I'm saying is more important to you than fundamentally what I've already said. You know what? We've already got a movement in America where the tenor and the tone sounds more than the fundamentals of the truth of what you said, right? We don't need another one of those.
We're going to try, it sounds like.
Yeah, apparently it does sound like we are going to try. You're right. And likewise, I want to just reiterate, and I have tried. I will tell you, the Surgeon General nominee, the more I learn this is the temptress. Is tempting me. But I'm going to stay true to what I laid out. Everybody that Trump appoints gets an A or an incomplete. They're an obvious A, like Weldon to me is an obvious A. All the rest of the names that Aaron mentioned there are incompletes.
Yeah, like Marty Macri.
Oh, Marty Macri, I'd actually give an A to. Yeah. Come to think of it, I forgot about him. Thank you for correcting me on that. I'd give Marty Macari. I'd give Marty Macari an A. I would. But we're going to talk more about him next hour too. But to me, there's obvious A's and then there's incompletes. And there could be incompletes for different reasons. Like I don't know Brooke Rollins at all. I don't know her. I don't have anything against her per se. I just have no idea what her connection is to being Secretary of Agriculture. That's all. I don't know. And living in Iowa, that's kind of a big deal to us. So why does everybody get an A or an incomplete? It's because the ecosystem of the Republican Party in America has changed. We are not primarily an ideological party anymore. We're a coalition-based party now. A lot of people that are conventional, traditional Reagan conservatives, as I've been most of my adult life, believe Trump has moved the party to the left. That's entirely untrue. The party's actually, in terms of what it actually does, maybe not in its talking points. Who cares about those, Aaron?
No.
Nobody should. And fundamentally in what it does, it's more to the right than it ever has been, at least since I've been of voting age. This is the most right the right wing has ever been. Talking points may not be, but the fundamental direction and policies are. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the natural habitat is evolving. And we are going to go from now judging whether or this is the metamorphosis that Trump has instilled in the Republican Party. It's a coalition-based party. And the expectation now is that you are welcome to have the ideology you want, but ultimately, so what does that look like? What do I mean when I say that? What I mean was the old arguments that we used to have on the right post-Reagan era were, are you a blank conservative, Reagan conservative, social conservative, fiscal conservative, foreign policy conservative? Are you a moderate? Are you a rhino? Right? Those are identifiers that are primarily ideological in nature. Donald Trump, by conquering the Republican Party, and any conqueror does this, the Republican Party prior to Reagan was not an ideological party. Reagan, as an ideologue, conquered the Republican Party, Aaron. So guess what the ecosystem for the Republican Party became after he became King Reagan? Ideological. And that became the plumb line by which things were judged on the right. Well, there's a different king now. There's only one eternal kingdom. And no mere human just sits on those thrones. So the era of Reagan ended a while ago. There has been this back and forth about what was going to reign in the wake of that. And now that argument's been settled. Trump is king. And so it'll be remade over in his image now. So this has gone from, and Reagan took the Republicans from essentially a small p progressive party, small p, meaning public-private partnerships to build interstate freeways under Eisenhower and national parks under Teddy Roosevelt. Reagan took that party and turned it into a right-wing ideological party. And then that era ran its course. There has been tons of infighting going back and forth on the right about what will take its place, and that's been determined now. Trump is king. And so now it'll be remade in his image. And he is interested in loyalty or coalitions. So the new line of demarcation is, which coalition are you in? Are you in the Mitch McConnell coalition? Are you in Trump's coalition? And those are really the only two coalition options you have at the moment. You can try to say, I'm in neither one. I wish you well doing that. You ever seen Survivor, the television show? So what happens on Survivor, and my wife and I probably watched the first 20 seasons, so I'm well versed in this TV show. And there are certain dynamics and tropes that play out every season. Right? Like you don't ever want to bring the guy that brings your Bible to the island, you're getting voted off first. Every time. You don't want to be the boomer with a work ethic who then tries to tell all these millennials we got to build shelter and everything else the first night when they just want to party and get half naked. You're gone. Certain tropes happen every season because human behavior is the constant. And in every season, the structure of the season is there are two opposing tribes. Within those two tribes, there are factions or what they call alliances. And then once the two opposing tribes get narrowed down, they're fused into one tribe. And so the irony is when they're just two tribes, there's multiple factions and alliances. When they get down to one tribe, there's just two. And there's always a person or a couple of people who think they're going to rise above it all and not join either faction. What do you think happens to them first time they go to the tribal council and vote?
See ya.
They're gone. Nobody trusts them. Nobody knows which side they're on, so they're gone. That's what the Republican Party is right now. There have been all these warring factions. They've now been merged into one governing party. And now there's really just two factions. You're a corporatist Republican or you're with Trump. There isn't another faction. If you attempt to act as if there is, I wish you well, you'll be distrusted and you won't get anything done. And you'll claim you're holding the system accountable, but you have no station. You have no agency. You're not holding anything accountable. You're just exiling yourself. Like, no one's taking seriously what you have to say because you have no skin in the game. You might even be right. And frankly, a lot of times, people like you, I know I've been one of those kinds of people, people like you are. No one cares. You don't have agency. You have no sweat equity. You're not in the fight.
This is all, what, descriptive or prescriptive? Wish it was another way.
Correct.
Maybe.
Yes.
But this is the way that we have right now.
This is what we have right now. That's just the reality. Like, you could have tried in 1861 to be a copperhead. How many of you learned what those were? The people who were anti-slavery but thought it wasn't worth fighting a civil war over, let alone one that granted the North all kinds of sweeping encroachments on individual liberty to do so, like a draft, things of that nature. You know why you don't know much about copperheads? Unless you took like the Ron Paul homeschool curriculum, you don't know anything about copperheads. You know why? They got voted out. Nobody trusted him. So they're gone. That's why the miniseries were called The Blue and the Gray, not the blue, the copperheads, and the gray. That's why the miniseries were called The North and the South, not the North, the copperheads, and the South. God bless your conscience. I'd never ask someone to violate it. But just understand, once that environment takes hold, and the various warring factions, the homesteaders, the Whigs, the Democrats, the Democrat Republicans, the abolitionists, the regulationists, okay, all the various factions that existed in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, once they get fused into two sides, Union, Confederate, there's no room for a third side. It doesn't exist. That's where we are now. It's where we are now. So you're either aligned with Trump or you're aligned with the system. And you can say, I'm not aligned with either. Okay. That's great. Just plan on having like little or no impact or influence on the process. And that might be okay. But it's also true. Because we're at that point in Survivor now. All the various factions and alliances have all fused into one tribe. And now there's two sides. And if you want to be the one that's going to hold them accountable, they're going to be like, hey, those people over there are trying to vote us out. It's a zero-sum game. We vote them out, they vote us out. So you holding everybody accountable means you're not voting for us, which means you're voting for who? Them. So good luck. That's just human nature. And that's where we are. Now, what that also means is when things become coalition-based as opposed to ideologically based, you get way more of only Nixon could go to China kind of politics. Way more of it. Because when the coalition takes precedence over ideology, people will compromise or sacrifice their ideology to acquire and then maintain a position of prominence within the coalition. Because as much as people love their principles and being self-righteous about them, they hate being shunned and isolated even more. So, Scott, is it Besant? That's how it's pronounced?
I believe so, yeah.
On the surface, you know, a guy in a homo relationship where him and his partner, lover, denied kids a mom and has George Soros ties. I mean, if King Steve was in charge of the GOP, Aaron, And if I am, it's going to be hard right ideology, right? Because I'm an ideologue. It'd be made in my image, right? Okay.
Yep.
So if I were king of the GOP, would Scott Bessent be anywhere on my vetting list?
No.
Of course not. But in a coalition-based party, is it entirely possible that Scott Bessent's like, well, I was with the Soros people, they lost, so I'm your Huckleberry, I'll do whatever you guys want me to do? Is that entirely possible?
It's possible.
It's absolutely possible. Is it also possible he's just going to knife us right in the back first chance he gets?
Possible.
Very possible. How would we know? We'll wait and see. There's no other way to know. Because when it becomes about your position, think of when you were in high school. You might have thought, I really think rolling up my Guess jeans is gay as hell. Y'all did it, though. So you could sit where you wanted to sit in the lunchroom and have the people talk to you wanted to talk to you. And ask the girl out you wanted to ask out. You did it, though. Human beings do all kinds of great and terrible things because of relationships. And that's another way of saying it's a coalition-based party now. I've said to you guys for years, this is how Democrats got fire-breathing black pastors to align with the same candidates that Rosie O'Donnell and the Rainbow Jihad did. That's essentially the ecosystem and culture of the American right now. I have no idea if it's worse or better. Frankly, given how little the right has accomplished in the last generation, I have a hard time believing it could possibly be worse. Looking at how much Trump accomplished his first term prior to COVID, and with all the resistance he faced, much of it fake, compared to everything else we got from the Republican Party for the previous 25, 30 years, I have a hard time believing it can be worse. I don't think it can be worse. I also don't believe there's I don't think he's subverting us in the traditional sense. I don't think there is some, exiled conservative movement of people who memorized all of our founding documents by heart. And their parents were the Marv Marinovich of the right wing. It's all they know. And Aaron, they've just been sitting on the sidelines, just getting thwarted and C-blocked by the MAGA movement for years, waiting. Then if we could just get these people out of the way, this massive movement of right-wing ideologues who are effective at governing would just finally take the place of prominence that belongs to them. Do you know who those names are? I would like to know. Do you know who they are?
No.
Neither do I. They don't exist. They don't exist. I was a strategist for the Republican presidential candidate that tried to represent that in 2016, Ted Cruz. We had to hire people from the Bushes. We couldn't even staff a presidential campaign in a primary with people from those kinds of ranks. So there's not some principled movement that's been just completely thwarted and subverted. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So I'm not giving you judgments, by the way. I'm giving you meteorological forecasts. This is what it is. So, it's high of 35 in Des Moines today, where I live. Blustery conditions. I mean, you don't have to like it. You can hate it, in fact. You can go out there, put your wife beater on, put on your shorts, and dress like you're going to the state fair in August. You're welcome to do that. Going to greatly increase the likelihood, though, you're going to come back with a cold, pneumonia, flu, fever. How about just overall general discomfort? Because it's cold as hell outside and you're dressed like it's August. It is what it is. So, I like culture wars better when my side wins and the other side loses. So, I'm aligned with Trump. Doesn't mean I'll agree with everything. But I prefer it to prison. Amen?
Amen.
Better than prison. Much better than prison. So, everything's an A or an incomplete. Because we don't know. We don't have a generation of coalition-based ecosystems on the right. They do over there, right? They've been this kind of party pretty much all of our lifetimes. Union workers, civil rights activists, homosexual activists, feminists, teacher unions. They've been black ministers. They've been this kind of a party as long as I can remember, and I'm 51. Now, I have no idea how those will work on the right. It might be better. I have a hard time believing it'll be any worse. We damn near just lost the greatest country in the world in the last generation. Came this close to doing it. Just handing it over. So I have a hard time believing it may not be great, but I have a hard time believing it's going to be worse. Kind of like Marty McCarry. I like Marty quite a bit. Do I agree with what he said about giving the jabs to pregnant women? Hell to the no. Do I like pretty much everything else Marty said the last few years? Pretty much. Like, could we have done better than Marty McCarry? Like, would I maybe pick Peter McCullough instead? Now, of course, I don't know Peter McCullough's background all the way, right? I don't know if there's something in there that he couldn't pass a vetting. I don't know. Do you know, Aaron?
No.
We don't know. So do I think Marty McCarry is the absolute best we could do for FDA commissioner? Probably not. Do I think he's way better than what we had? Absolutely. And that's how I'm going to assess this until we get into game day and the proverbial bullets start flying, and we see, Aaron, how these people operate under pressure and how they govern. And then we'll know. We know a tree by its fruit. That's what it means to be in Gamaliel mode. Not to mention, let me also tell you this. I backed the guy who challenged the king in the primary. I don't have any influence, nor should I. I lost. I came at the king and I lost. That's politics. I don't have any agency. They don't need me. They just crushed me in my own state, where for the last 15 plus years, I've been one of the most influential voices in Iowa. I got annihilated. So my influence is not needed, nor is it asked for or sought. So it would make no difference to sit here and get on some high horse for no reason with no ROI in the first place. It would just be sanctimony. I'm not influencing anything. I'm not being listened to on that level. I do have influence with a platform of this magnitude, but it's not with the Trump transition team. You come at the king, you miss. I did. Okay. Exile. This is not a trial, Aaron. It's a sentencing.
Yeah.
All right. Death or exile.
Yep.
All right. That's where I am. Okay. So that's the idea that all these people that didn't back Trump in the primary suddenly are going to push him. No, you're not. That's not how it works. That's not how kings operate. They listen to their benefactors and patrons, not people that don't pay taxes or bleed for them. Aaron, you have any thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I think a great example of this coalition-driven, whatever this is, movement is Trump's labor pick. Now, if you're coming at this from strictly ideological grounds, she's awful if you believe in right to work, if you believe in several core tenets of the Republican Party of yesteryear. But did you really think that Sean O'Brien, is that his name? Teamsters University, or Teamsters
right. Yeah.
Union president. Did you really believe that he was going to speak at the RNC, that the Teamsters were going to make a big stink about not endorsing Kamala Harris for president and also releasing their straw poll results from kind of the granular grassroots level? And did you think that after all of that, Trump wouldn't reward them somehow, some way?
Correct.
That's just the reality. It's descriptive, not prescriptive.
Correct.
Conversely, if you did not vote for Donald Trump, but you somehow think that you're going to hold him accountable now, no, that's not how this works. Again, descriptive, not prescriptive. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think somehow, I think on some level, instinctively, not cognitively, certainly not, but last year during the Republican primary that wasn't, and then into this year, I never thought that this was going to be a lame duck presidency, even if he could make it. I thought it would be a little bit like last time or better just because of this. Again, instinctively I understood that. Cognitively, I did not. So you're going to get some really good stuff that you like. You're going to get some stuff that makes you squirm a little bit. That's just the reality. And that's okay, just as long as we're being honest about that.
Amen. More in a moment. All All right, let's bring in our good friend Bob Vander Plaats. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I was just bragging about my Vikings being 9-2, and you got to trump me by saying your lines are 10-1.
I wasn't going to say a word. You're the one that chose to bring it up.
I know. I just but yeah, I'm proud that my Vikings are 9-2.
You stepped on that rake all on your own.
I did.
All right.
Doing really good, though. Great.
So where were you this weekend?
This weekend, Darla and I went to David Horowitz's Freedom Center Conference. We were invited by a couple of really good friends who love the Family Leader Ministry. And they said, you expose us to a lot of things all the time. We want to expose you to something. And so you'd be willing to come to Naples, Florida in November and have 3 nights at the Ritz-Carlton Ocean View. And Darla said, well, that's a pretty easy decision. Of course, we'd love to do that. But we had a 3-day conference there, went from early in the morning to late at night. They ran a great show, a lot of great speakers. But the enthusiasm in that room was palatable. Elections have consequences. You could tell on the people in that room, they totally understood that and grasped it.
So tell me what some of the major themes were. Like, for example, there's a lot of talk about ending wokeness.
Oh my gosh.
And did the American people reject that or not?
That was a huge deal. And there's a lot of speakers. The speakers that you would know and some that you probably wouldn't know. But this, Ned Ryan of American Majority. Ned really laid out some things and just talked about, America stiff-armed all of the stuff. The pronoun language, they talked about a commercial that Trump ran in key states. And we didn't get a chance to see in Iowa a lot of these commercials because we weren't a key state. But she's for them, they, I'm for you. That was a big closing argument for Trump. Basically, this is nonsense, these pronouns. Mutilating our kids, taking away parental rights, all that stuff. I think what it is and why the Democrat Party and Rachel Maddow and others are having a meltdown, the stuff they were selling, America's clearly not buying. And I think what they're saying and what we saw, the boomerang effect is really coming back this way to a point where I thought of your daughter, Anastasia. Isabel Brown. Have you heard of Isabel Brown?
Yeah, I did a speaking engagement with her in Montana a couple of years ago.
Boy, I just thought she knocked it.
She used to be with TPUSA, or maybe she still is, I believe.
No, she's on her own now
Okay.
in the digital space, but I thought she knocked it out of the park about how Gen Z can save America. And she talked about how Gen Z is interested in marriage between a man and a woman, how they're interested in family, how they're interested into the Constitution, the foundations of our freedom. And all the stuff, Steve, that you and I have been having show after show on and saying, listen, they're lying to you. It looks like the youth are figuring this out. And what I thought was cool about Isabel Brown, Steve, she likened where they're at in their ages to the Founding Fathers. And talked about how the Founding Fathers were young and they were rebels saying we're not doing this anymore. And she said that's why she believes Gen Z can be part of saving this country.
Aaron, as a millennial, you buying that?
On some level, yeah. I mean, I'm sitting back in the best of the best of Gen Z that I see, even like in my own family, are doing better and like have better heads on their shoulders than the best of what I've seen from the millennial generation. So on some level, it's not a wholesale shift, but yeah, on some level, those who are radicalized are really radicalized in that generation.
So, Steve, what I said to Darla, we're sitting there and we got done listening to Isabel Brown and just listening to Aaron as well. But I said to Darla, Steve and I did a show back like in 2011 or whatever it was, and they're doing same-sex marriage and all that stuff. And you said a comment to me, and I haven't forgotten. You said, Bob, pretty soon we're going to be the cool kids on the block because we're going to be call type or whatever, countercultural. And we definitely are that right now. And you're seeing that. We might be the cool kids on the block right now, and Gen Z might be going with us for that purpose.
One of the other themes you were telling me that people brought up at this event is what it meant that Trump was essentially in exile for 4 years and then came back.
I think that might be the untold story right now. At some point, they're going to say it. But the untold story is that, listen, this guy was president 2016 to 2020. And in his first term, remember, he surrounded himself, first of all, with Reince Priebus, Rex Tillerson, and a lot of the others, and they kept trying to undermine him. the bureaucracy said, no, we're in charge. You're not in charge. We're going to save America from a duly elected president. But now, regardless if the election was stolen or not, but he was out of office for 4 years and Joe Biden took over. And for 4 years, you have the opportunity with the likes of Brooke Rollins and America First, who's now nominee for Secretary of Agriculture.
Can I pause and ask you about that?
Yeah.
Does she have any, I don't know, I'm asking, does she have like any expertise or ties in that arena at all?
Well, she has a degree in agriculture from Texas A&M.
Like I said, I'm asking, I don't know.
And that's her passion.
Okay.
And all I can do is take a look at some of my Texas friends, whether it be Ted Cruz or Greg Abbott or others cheering on.
Yeah, but Texas ag friends aren't necessarily always in alignment with Iowa ag friends. So what are your Iowa ag friends saying?
Yeah, none of them have commented yet. So, but a lot of my, and I guess I haven't talked to Mike Nagg. The fact is, though, Heritage Foundation, Project 25, a lot of these people are saying, okay, here's the blueprint. Russ Vaught, who's now nominated again, basically saying, this is how you clear this thing out and you win over the bureaucracy. I think what's got really Rachel Maddow and some of these people really shook up, there's a new sheriff in town. Mm-hmm. And Trump, I think, knows he's got like 100 days, 1 year at max to really get this stuff done and get uprooted. And speaker after speaker talked about it. Now is the time. And that is why I think you saw so much hope in that room, because they saw what the Biden, Kamala Harris, woke agenda, what it was doing to this country.
So you sense, as a follow-up to that, you sense there is more preparedness, zeal, and willingness to govern this time.
I definitely do. Matter of fact, we listened to a couple people who are willing to go in and start on day one. I'm glad to see that he's being advised by a guy like Ned Ryan on some of this stuff as well. Ned's one of us, and he believes in this stuff, and he's been around the block a time or two. But he has a lot of others advising him too, and I think Trump wants this to be his show and prove that he won. In your words, Steve, I think he wants to spike the football in the end zone.
And then Doge. So is this a troll? Is it a construct? Is it real? Right? So Department of Government Efficiency. So this is Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, Vivek's so invested in this. I mean, Fox was going to attempt to rebuild. This is like their fifth attempt to rebuild Fox Nation, their digital platform. They had a great guy, actually. They just chose to run it for him. They just chose to fire him for stupid reasons. That was Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
So they announced about a month ago they were going to relaunch this with Vivek as their point person. But now he is saying he's giving up his show and he's going to go work with Elon, and they're going to launch a show and as part of the Doge effort. So how were you given any intel on how legit this is?
Well, first of all, people are taking it as legit.
Okay.
They're taking it as legit. Matter of fact, I would say beyond anytime you mention Donald Trump winning the election over Kamala Harris, and that's an applause line, didn't care when you said it in the conference, people are going to applaud. But if you mention the name Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy, huge applause as well. They see this as an opportunity to say, you know what, we're done with politics as usual. And who coined that phrase was Newt Gingrich way back when. We need to be done with politics as usual. They're basically saying in 2025, they see being done with politics as usual. And so they're putting a lot of hope on Elon Musk, on Vivek Ramaswamy, and now our own U.S. Senator Joni Ernst has been named the Senate's chairman of kind of Doge. And her tagline is, I went to Washington saying I was going to make them squeal. Now it's time we make them squeal. The interesting part of that is Joni needed Trump to win and needed Elon and Vivek to be appointed.
I remember Joni's ad telling us it was going to take 10 years before she was going to try to.
No, but now here we are. So it's an opportunity. But I got to tell you, I think people are thirsty for that type of leadership. Say, you know what? Get government out of this thing. I texted with Vivek, Steve, about defunding Planned Parenthood. He texted right back. He goes, just plain insanity that we are continuing to fund these guys. But defunding Planned Parenthood, taking the Department of Education, getting it out of Washington, D.C., return it to the states, taking on a lot of this pork spending. I think it's great that you don't have somebody that's actually got Senate confirmation deal saying, this is what I'd get rid of. Now you guys got to go do it.
Was there anything you came away from this concerned about?
Well, the only thing I came really a little bit concerned is that there's no doubt people are euphoric right now because of the victory. And we've been there before, right? You get so excited because, hey, we won. But now what you want to do is make sure they deliver. They won. They're continuing to be bold and courageous. Now we need to make sure that Washington follows suit. That they see America won. They elected Donald Trump with this kind of bold and courageous agenda. Now give him the keys, give him the freedom in order to do it. But there's no doubt one of the palatable concerns spoken several times was, how did John Thune stay majority leader in the U.S. Senate? Mm-hmm. Because that's a little bit like the new boss looks a heck of a lot like
Well, I mean, he's a Mitch
the old
McConnell
boss.
trained acolyte.
Right.
Yeah.
And the only basically validation for Thune getting that position was McConnell appointed his successor. McConnell raised all the funds for the Senate reelection. So therefore, if you raise that kind of money, you get to a point. I still believe, and I think I texted you this, Steve, I think it would have been great if Trump would have put his finger on the scale to the point of saying, I don't want Thune, I don't want Cornyn, I don't want Scott, I don't want any of these guys. Put Ted Cruz to lead this Senate. Let him and I go to work. I think that would have shown a real message. Even with the deal with, I think you tweeted this, with Matt Gaetz stepping away, it would have been a lot of fun to see Clarence Thomas appointed Attorney General and then putting DeSantis or Cruz in to be a Supreme Court judge. I think those are the kind of things that are going to send a message to the American people that, listen, not only did we win, but we mean it. What I'm saying, though, as DeSantis and Governor Reynolds has given a lot of governors courage across the country, Trump's win, I think, is stiffening some people's spines about what we need to do in D.C. today.
Aaron, you have any thoughts on what you just heard?
No, this is kind of echoing what I said, I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago off the air. I might have repeated it on the air, but I think an under-discussed development this time around is that all of these appointments, regardless of what you think of them, having seen the last 8 years and what they've tried to do to this guy, all of these appointments now know what they're getting into. They know what they're up against. I have to believe that, unless they're just, too dumb to get out of bed in the morning. They know what they're up against. They know what they're getting in for. They know what the expectations are. The last time there was plausible deniability, I had no idea that there was immediately going to be a Russian collusion hoax. I had no idea that, Brett Kavanaugh was going to be, filled in the blank. There was plausible deniability that we didn't really know what we were getting into. Trump didn't really know what he was doing. Trump has said, I didn't appoint the best people last time. I didn't surround myself with the best people. This time, all of these individuals who have anything at stake, whether it's the people you're talking about over the weekend, Bob, or the cabinet appointments, they know what they're getting into. That has to mean something. That has to account for something.
Well, back to the Joni Ernst thing. This actually is a good follow-up, Aaron, to what we were just discussing before Bob came on, right? So for 10 years, what did Joni Ernst do as a senator? Do you know?
She stood behind Mitch McConnell and John Thune and others, but we really don't know. Matter of fact, my biggest disagreement with her was on the Disrespect for Marriage Act.
Right. So for 10 years, we can't, off the top of our head, come up with anything remarkable you and I as U.S. Senator has done for a decade, right? So she aligned herself, but you said something very key there without even knowing what we talked about before you came on. She stood behind Mitch McConnell a lot. So that's the coalition she aligned herself with, and figured that they were the ones calling the shots. So, she did what they wanted. Now, doing one of these numbers.
Yeah. Who won? It's like,
who's calling the shots?
I'm going with the winners.
And so now she's suddenly giving Vivek Ramaswamy and the Trump and the Trump transition team an itemized list of $2 trillion in cuts that could be made. $2 trillion in cuts. She's been in the Senate majority before, right? In the last 10 years.
Exactly.
She hasn't been in the minority this whole time. So that's my point that I was making earlier. We're not an ideologically based party anymore. That is not Trump's ecosystem. Yeah. It's a coalition-based party. Now, in a lot of times, so that people can secure their place of preeminence within the coalition, they will just do whatever the coalition asks of them. Most people are not driven by conviction. They're driven by position. Will this get me the outcome that I want? Will this get me the favor that I want? Will this get me the relationship or the reward that I want? Most people in life, and when I say most, I mean like 90%, are not driven by conviction. And they're driven by position.
And that's why I think, Steve, with Trump winning, and not just winning, but winning big, and seeing the enthusiasm behind this guy, not like, okay, he won, but it's not a big deal anymore. The enthusiasm about that he won, I think, again, has stiffened people like Joni Ernst's spine, future candidates' spine. People want leadership today.
I think what it's done is told Joni Ernst, Mitch McConnell is glitching out and on his deathbed. Donald Trump is king. So if you still want to stand behind someone of prominence in the camera, this is now where you need to stand, and that's what she's going to do.
And that is a good sign. One more thing.
Yep. We got 2 minutes.
One more thing. Well, this won't even take 2 minutes, so we probably got a couple more things. But one more thing before I exit is that, so we're at the Ritz-Carlton, Naples, Florida. Have you guys ever been there? It's just a gorgeous.
Actually, I have been there.
Gorgeous place.
Yep.
And walking the beach, doing those kind of things. And if you ever stay at the Ritz, I mean, they're first class with everything.
Yep.
I mean, they are there to serve.
Yep.
You wish America was run like Ritz-Carlton. I'm just here to serve and help you out.
By the way, I can't afford that. Ron DeSantis let me come there, had me stay there for an event I did for him. But
I can't afford it either. I mean, we didn't pay for it. But long story short, Darla and I get done with the first night there, Thursday night. And we're walking out of the ballroom, we get into the elevator, and we're with a team member of Ritz-Carlton. And I made a couple of comments to him about, hey, really impressed with how you guys operate. Your team is really here to serve. You guys do things with excellence, that kind of thing. And he looks at me, and he kind of smiles, and he says to me, you're Bob Vander Plaats, aren't you?
No way.
Wait. I said, yeah. He goes, I love the Steve Deace Show. And he went on talking about the Steve Deace Show and about my appearance on Mondays. Maybe he's just giving me flatter, but loves seeing me on Monday. And I said, I'm going to give a shout out to him. His name is Kelly. The team at Ritz-Carlton and Naples, great job. But you have a fan in Kelly in Naples, Florida.
Well, thank you, Kelly. You guys were great to my family and I when we stayed there. About a year or so ago. So you guys were great to us. So thank you. Appreciate it, man.
And it was a conference where you just didn't feel uncomfortable at all. And again, I think people have a little swag, a little bounce in their step. Good things on the horizon. I'm hopeful and I'm thankful.
All right. We're going to come back. Hour 2 is next. The hullabaloo over Trump's Surgeon General nominee, I think, provides an opportunity for some teachable moments and workshops. And we're going to take advantage of them when we come back. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace. He is Aaron McIntyre. Todd Erzin has the day off. He'll be back tomorrow. You can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Email us, steve@stevedeace.com. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on X or Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You can also find me, if you would like, via the podcast version. Oh, before I get there, don't forget to subscribe to our new YouTube channel, please. At Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. Subscribe there as we're trying to start all over on the second largest search engine on planet Earth after all the strikes, the blocks, the censorship we received for the years of telling you the truth during the scamdemic when they didn't want the truth out. Well, now we're just starting all over again. So if you guys wouldn't mind giving us a subscribe there at Deace Show on YouTube, where we are getting as many views on our show now with about 12% of the subscription base that we just gave up on the old show, which tells you and kind of quantifies for you what censorship looks like. All right. So again, give us a subscribe, please, over at YouTube at Deace Show there. That's at Deace Show there. You can also, if you wouldn't mind, if you love the podcast, leave us a 5-star review wherever you choose to podcast from, and then make sure to hit subscribe, or in the case of iTunes, you click on follow, and that'll make sure that every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time. All right. We are brought to you by our friends over at Home Title Lock. Have you heard about the fast-growing crime called house stealing? It's real. And it's happening more and more, especially right now when so many of our homes are skyrocketing in value, but there's so little movement in the market. And so a lot of us not even looking at our home titles because we're not signing them over. We're not selling and buying homes right now. And all that equity is accruing, which makes them very appealing to scammers. All right. And so in today's world, you got to question everything, take control over protecting your most valuable assets like your home. So how does house stealing work? Well, a scammer files a one-page document using your information that maybe they got off the dark web, forges your signature, stamps it with a phony notary seal, submits it to the county, and just like that, it's possible your property doesn't belong to you anymore. A lot of times they don't even want the house. They just want the equity, right? So they'll take out loans against your property and you won't even know about it until those bills start showing up in the mail. So this is why you want the triple lock protection system from Home Title Lock. It monitors your title 24/7, alerts you if there's any changes to your title, works fast to restore your title, no out-of-pocket costs if fraud occurs. You don't have to wait until you're a victim. You can get a free 30-day trial right now and a free title history report when you use the promo code Steve Deace at HomeTitleLock.com. Again, use the code Steve Deace for a free 30-day trial and a free title history report. Code Steve Deace at HomeTitleLock.com. Again, that's code Steve Deace at HomeTitleLock.com. All right, so we've kind of done an introduction to what I had planned on what is the difference now between an ideologically based party and a coalition-based party. I received one note, and I can't really tell if this guy is being really obtuse or I just didn't really explain where things are at. Where is this here? I want to read this to you guys. I had it called up and I lost it. Dang it. Ruby. Ruby says we went from... No, he replies to an email I sent him 4.5 years ago. And he says, hey, we went from fighting for freedom to Trump is king. Now, things changed. We had 2 elections in 4.5 years, correct, Aaron?
Yes.
So the American people got to render verdicts twice?
Yes.
Okay. So the date today would be what?
It is the 25th of November, 2024.
2024. It's not July 10th, 2020?
No.
No? Okay. So Ruby says, we went from fighting for freedom to Trump is king. I thought we were a republic. First of all, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm talking about the ecosystem of a political party, guys. You don't have... I'm not talking about the country. You belong to a church. A church typically has what are called bylaws. You belong to a corporation. A corporation typically has what are called what? Bylaws. You work for a profession. They typically have what are called what? Bylaws. You go to a college or a school. They typically have what? A handbook. Bylaws. So we are a republic. I'm just telling you how this is going to work itself out. This is how political parties work, guys. They're always either driven by ideology or coalition. The founding political party of the country thought it was a great idea to make George Washington king, by the way. So again, you guys, some of you are acting like this is all new. And we were on this really principled road to success. It's really not new at all. These have always been your 2 options. Every political movement is driven by coalition or ideology. It can't be driven by anything else. Those are the only 2 things it could possibly be driven by. So you're aligned because of shared mutual interests, or you're aligned because of shared ideological interests. There's really no other kind of interest. It can only be those 2 things. And over the course of human history, since we're the longest running experiment in human freedom and self-governance, have most political edifices and organizations and parties been driven by coalition or ideology? By coalition. Thomas Jefferson once said, if I should go to heaven but only with members of a political party, I should rather not go at all. And then right after saying that, joined a political party and became enemies with his previous lifelong friend, who would then close as his lifelong friend again, John Adams. They were at each other's throats. There's nothing new under the sun. Some of you are acting like there was this really principled thing happening and then Trump just came in and got in the way and spoiled it. No, there was not. We had the Tea Party election of 2010. They took over Congress, and then they got into office and became, at the time, the biggest spending Congress of all time, with the majority. I have to ask sometimes, did we delude ourselves this deeply? Because it appears that we did. We had a fight. Those of us who preferred an ideologically driven party. I only leveraged a few things. Many of my closest friendships in this business, many of the relationships I had with major platforms, and potentially my own show. Other than that, Aaron, I kind of set this one out and did nothing, right? Just hung out.
Nah, nothing.
Well, I just kind of watched this thing play itself out.
Up.
I didn't do anything.
Yep.
That's how important I thought it was to be an ideologically based party over a coalition-based party. I lost. Those of you that agree with me, we lost. So you have an option. You can pout. That's an option. Or you can participate. If you want to participate, these are the bylaws. How long do you stay hired at a job if you're like, well, I'm going to go in and change all the bylaws? How long is that? How's that typically work out? Don't take the job. Again, you don't have to be politically active. You could also try to go start something new. Good luck with that. But these are the bylaws of what we have. And so if you're not participating, you're just not relevant. You can yell and scream, doesn't matter how many followers you have. That's the reality. If you're not, and participating means you are aligned with one of these two coalitions on the right. They're the only two meaningful ones. The Trump coalition and the corporatist coalition. Those are the only two. I didn't prefer it this way. I'm an ideologue. On the other hand, though, I must admit, I also didn't know that Trump and his people were this serious about governing. Otherwise, I might not have done some of the things I did during the primary, frankly. Because let's be honest, in my defense, heretofore, how serious had they shown they really were about the details of governance? Not much. In fact, we were told governing and plans were for cucks, Aaron. I remember that too during the primary. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But hey, I'm a big believer in Reagan's maxim. It's amazing what you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit for it. So, I mean, if Trump wants to do a bunch of detailed level of governance with serious plans and a policy vision for the country that he's prepared to execute, my response should be, well, that's not the guy that I was that I had a personal fondness for, so I'm out. That's really immature and frankly stupid. I mean, that's where we are, guys. I'm not your mom, I'm your dad, So your mom will tell you that you can be anything. Your dad will tell you, well, you probably can't be that. This is what you can be. Go be the best be of that. Your mom will tell you, put your mind to anything, sweetie. Daddy will tell you, yeah, I don't think you've got a 36-inch vertical, so try a different sport. I'm a dad. It's my job. So I'm just going to tell you what it is. And this is what it is. Which brings us to what happened over the weekend. So I take a night off on Friday night. And I woke up to a deluge of replies and posts directed at me over Trump's Surgeon General pick. And apparently, because I took a night off with my wife on Friday night and wasn't instantly available to destroy someone whose name I'd never even heard of. Todd texted me about her at some point Friday night. I interrupted date night long enough to respond to him. I'm like, never heard of the woman. Don't know who she is. Which kind of blows my mind, frankly.
Yeah, some of these picks, I'm like, I've never heard of this person before.
I mean, given how involved I was in an intimate level on policy fights during this scandemic, never heard this woman's name. I still don't know how it's pronounced. How is it pronounced?
Jeanette Nishewet.
Nishewet. Okay. Jeanette Nishewet. Yeah, I like never watch cable news. And frankly wouldn't recommend anybody does. So apparently she was a Fox News thing.
Yeah.
I'll take someone's word for it.
Yeah.
I had no clue. Okay. But my feed is instantly, before I log on, is instantly inundated with response to this woman demanding, and I'm a sellout, and I betrayed everything, that I have not rushed to condemn this woman I've never even heard of without vetting her myself quite yet. And so I did. And I want to mention something here. I saw plenty of criticism of this woman. Plenty. And all of it, I think, legit and disturbing. But I saw some. I also saw one video clip that's dated after a lot of the statements she said, Aaron, of that she was getting, I think, rightly criticized for. And she went on Tucker's show when he was still on Fox. I think this was in 22. Because a lot of the crazy statements she made about the scamdemic were in 20 and 21. Not all, but the majority of the things that are going around. And then in 2022, she went on Tucker Carlson's show to condemn the FDA and CDC for approving the toxic genetic serums known as the COVID not a vaccine for children, saying there's no evidence that we should be giving these en masse to children whatsoever. Aaron, can you recall how many people you saw go on the largest cable news network at any point in time in 2022 and 2023? You remember clips of, you put in montages, things of that nature, that were even willing to go that far. Can you think of how many times you might have seen that?
I mean, at that point in time, remember.
Yes.
Pretty un poquito, as you like to say.
Yeah, it's a small list. It's a small list. Now, why is that relevant to me? It's relevant to me because this is part of a vetting process, right? And I mean, don't you want to know? Don't you want to know if she had an evolution or such? The other thing that bothered me, Aaron, is a lot of the same people criticizing her were criticizing Marty McCarry. They're not the same person.
Oh, no.
Not even close. There's basically one disturbing, problematic tweet from McCarry referencing him urging pregnant women to take the jab, which he's dead wrong about that.
I mean, the last chapter of his book, too, he's pretty friendly towards the jab.
Yes.
But other than that.
But he was also an outspoken critic of lockdowns,
Correct.
Masks, all the PPE measures.
Came on shows like this.
Yes. We didn't have, as a Johns Hopkins guy coming on shows like this, it's basically, Aaron, an invitation to say, I'm volunteering for excommunication from my peer group.
Yeah, I don't have the tattoo.
Yeah. I mean, testified before Congress. They're not the same guy. They're not the same person at all. So back to the Surgeon General pick. I mean, I originally, and McCarry as well, I originally recommended my mom take the jab. Said it here on the show. I originally recommended we go to masks instead of lockdowns. Well, instead of locking everything down, why don't we just wear masks? I advocated for that. And then in both cases, I saw what the actual data was, and I reversed myself. Ron DeSantis went from a guy putting out press releases bragging that they had the best warp speed rollout of any governor in America to then being the only health department in America to this very day still that is telling the truth about the jabs. Just looked at the data. So this woman that Trump has nominated has made a lot of very problematic statements in 2021 and in 2020, even calling for censorship and everything else. And I'm seeing some people who are pretty loyal Trump supporters. Eric Metaxas, by the way, you got to go see Bonhoeffer, folks. It's great. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. our former colleague and our buddy Chad Prather. There's a lot of people that are pretty hardcore Trumpers that are going to the mattresses about this pick. I saw Lara Logan go after her this morning too. I think General Flynn has. So I mean, you're going after this. I mean, Trump has aligned a good section of his fiercest backers and supporters in opposition to this nomination. I think I'm the entirety of Moms for Liberty has come out against her just on the mask and kids thing. Don't get me wrong. I think she should answer all those questions. I do. And this is a point I was trying to make on a reply to a guy I've respected for many years, Tom Woods. I absolutely believe she should be forced to answer all those questions. But why don't we actually see what her answers are? So here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to share some of the things I shared with you on social media about this stuff over the weekend. And then we're going to look at some of the replies that are countering what I said. And I'm going to try to respond to as many of those as I possibly can.
All right, we'll begin, if you're ready to go,
Yep.
with the aforementioned tweet responding to Tom Woods. I only put the first part of the tweet because that kind of sums up the entire message. If you want to read the rest, I have it up in front of me. But this is what you just said. You just spelled this out, what you were replying to Tom Woods about.
Sure.
So I don't really think we need to go into that much more because you just did that on the show. So let's begin with this retort from Fedigator with this tweet from 2017 and 2024. Fedigator says, Steve, you didn't listen and learn from your own advice. You said back in 2017, remember these words before this is all over. Enablers, shills, collaborators will learn why you don't take a scorpion for a pet. And then in 2024, earlier this year, you said Vivek is the next to learn this lesson.
Correct. So is today July 22nd, 2017?
No.
No. Did Trump do nothing of substance that was any good after July 22nd, 2017?
No, he did some good things.
Did some good things. No one changes their mind based on new information?
Everything is static, apparently.
Apparently nothing ever changes? There's never any new information. You never find out you're wrong? You never have to own that and apologize? That's not a principle. That was an observation. When I said that in, what was the date of when I was talking about Vivek?
January 13th of this year.
January 13th of this year. So my point there was we were on the cusp of the Iowa caucuses on January 15th, when I was pretty confident that Vivek was only going to get a few more votes than me. And so my point there was the guy basically made his entire candidacy an exhaust pipe for, of Trump's candidacy. And that just wasn't going to work. If I want Trump, I'll just vote for Trump. Why would I vote for you? What's the point of your candidacy? I mean, just stop talking about ideas for the most part and just spent most of his time talking about Trump and dissing Nikki Haley, which I've always been in favor of, by the way. Okay. So, I mean, do you know how that's relevant to this conversation?
I'm not quite sure.
I don't know either. Then on the other hand, though, turns out it worked out great for Vivek. His candidacy was going nowhere. And now he's given a position of extreme. I mean, he's given a position, this Doge thing in terms of its viral content producing possibility is incalculable. I mean, the amount of content that Vivek and Elon are going to produce, the memes that are going to come out of this. And it just so happens that Elon owns the largest platform on the world for said content. That's going to be gold for Vivek, Jerry. Gold. Gold. But again, circumstances are different than they were on January 13th. On January 13th, we thought it was pretty likely Trump was going to go to prison.
Hadn't been shot at yet.
Hadn't been shot at yet, thank you. Hadn't laid out this aggressive policy issue vision for the country yet. Hadn't nominated J.D. Vance yet for VP. Just things are different than they were on January 13th.
Can I take a stab at this as well?
Sure.
I think it's pretty abundantly clear, and this is why I still have a great amount of disdain for Vivek, the politician. Personally, I mean, again, I think as a guy, as a dad, great dad, obviously, because I've seen him up close and personal with his kids. I think he figured this thing out. I think he figured out what you talked about at the top of the show.
Before we did?
Before we did.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Now, did he take advantage of that? Maybe did he have intentions that were not pure as the driven snow? Or maybe he just thought, this is my way to actually have a say in this coalition? Maybe. I don't know what his deep down intentions were. But I think Vivek figured this out. I think that's why his candidacy was the way that it was.
Very true. Especially if you look at the timing of his transition, right?
Correct.
He was talking serious issues, and then Trump got indicted of March of 2023, right? And he is on the first plane down to the Florida courthouse with Laura Loomer, right? Okay. And just reinvented himself. So I'm fine doing that. I guess, there's probably a reason Vivek Ramaswamy is a multimillionaire, and I just make a nice living. He figures stuff like this out before I do.
So I want him to run for governor, for Ohio governor.
I've already endorsed that prospect. I would like to see him now take those instincts and govern with them. I agree. I've already made that endorsement.
Not to be too self-deprecating, and people hear what they want to hear all the time. I've never been so happy to be wrong about the prospect of Donald Trump having no shot at winning the presidency again. I was wrong about that, and I'm happy to be wrong. I want to be wrong about Vivek Ramaswamy, too, because I still think he's kind of a craven dude, the way that he's wormed his way into this. But I want to see him, whether it's with Doge, whether it's running for Ohio governor, or maybe getting appointed to that Senate seat now vacated by J.D. Vance. I want to go see him do now. And I want to be proven wrong. I really do. Ready to move on?
Yep, move on. Yep.
Here's the next response to that tweet. This is from Sarah Menser.
Well, that's long.
Just
summarize it then.
Yeah, I understand your Gamaliel approach and agree with it. However, this looks like a typical Trump rewarding those who kiss his butt on Fox News pick. Also bringing in someone to fight with his Maha pick seems like the other angle to me. And maybe Surgeon General is enough of a figurehead pick who has no real power that it will not damage the Maha governing too much.
Totally fair. Now, we could also turn this around. We don't know. I could also turn this around. This is why I want to know what happened from the comments that she was making, where she was basically auditioning for a job with Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci on Fox News in 2020 and 2021. And then she shows up on Tucker Carlson's show in 2022 to say, do not give these jabs to kids. I'm just telling you right now, we've gotten one Republican politician with power to stop giving these jabs to kids. The governor of Florida. None of the rest of them have done it, including people I like. Yet she went on Fox News and said it, Aaron. I would like to know. I'd like to know what caused her evolution on this. So, because here's what could be, because if there's a rational explanation, here's what could also be the plan. Take someone who was formerly known as a big pharma shill. I'll go back to what I said last hour. When you're in an era of coalition governance, you're in the era of only Nixon could go to China. What does that mean? Well, Nixon was considered as Eisenhower's vice president. While Eisenhower's out there, doing summits with Khrushchev, Nixon supposedly represented the hard anti-communist right. And now he becomes president, and what does he do? He's the one that normalizes relations with China.
Yeah, I see what you're going.
You see where I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's entirely possible the other way, too, though. It's entirely possible that, do any of us here want to just completely wreck? So the pharmaceutical industry does no good? No good. I got my annual sinus infection as we speak. Thank God for doxycycline. It doesn't do any good?
I gave that to you, sorry.
Or my son did, yeah. So it does no good. It does no good at all then. None. We don't want penicillin. We don't want inhalers. We don't want anything. Just going to rub crystals? It's entirely possible, too, on the other end, she could be a very powerful witness to the pharmaceutical industry the other way.
She might think every single jab on the face of the planet is good. You should give all 600 to your kids.
Right.
And also believe in transparency and say, hey, let's just release the data. Let's just release the data on all of this. That could be the case. We don't know.
And she may not. She may not. Now, the president's not going to call me because I took him on and lost. That's just not how fiefdoms work. Okay? But if he did, I mean, I would probably tell him there's probably someone without this amount of baggage on cable news to unite your base against you that you could probably get, if that's what you're going for, right? If you're going for a Nixon and go to China thing, okay, if that's what you're going for, right? Probably somebody without this level of baggage, graveyard of regrettable clips on cable news to alienate your base right at the time you need them united behind you. That's probably what I would tell him. But the other angle is possible too. That's what I don't know. And I don't know how anybody could know. If we were an ideologically driven party still, we would probably know, right? We'd probably know. Like if Donald Trump had not won the presidency, would Joni Ernst have submitted an itemized list of $2 trillion in cuts the government could make today?
Hell no.
No. You know how we know that? She didn't do it the last 10 years. Because she's been in the Senate for 10 years. A decade. She didn't do it the last 10 years. She did basically nothing. Just stood behind Mitch McConnell. That's essentially what she did on camera. Just stood behind Mitch McConnell. When people are driven by position, and most people are. It's just human nature. It's not bad. It's just nature. Most people didn't go to 11 different schools like I did and move all the time. So most people are driven by position. I'm used to being on my own. Most people aren't like that. They're like emotionally mature and are good around people. And so they need to feel welcome. And a lot of times will do things they might not have otherwise done in order to experience that. That's the ecosystem of a coalition-driven party. More in a moment. One of the reasons why I think it's important to have this conversation is because movements struggle to go from dissident and insurgent to ruling and reigning, to governing. In fact, do you have this tweet up there, Aaron? I'm gonna about perpetual dissent. Let's go there actually next. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the hardest things with a movement is to give up perpetual dissent, because perpetual dissent in politics is easy, and it is also very highly addictive. You never have to govern, which means you also never have to be wrong. You never have to be held accountable. You never have to make the tough call in an imperfect world. You never have to take the risk that could blow up in your face. And on today's social media, you can be outraged and anonymous simultaneously, so you never have to face your own detractors. And as a species, we are just prone to self-righteousness, that whole ye be like God thing anyway. And that's what makes this condition so appealing. It also means we can turn our own suffering into an idol. What does that mean? I mean, you can come to the point of, I suffered greatly for doing the right thing during COVID. Therefore, if you don't join me in surrendering the country to Kamala Harris, you sold out. You don't get to do that. I'm sorry if you suffered greatly during COVID. Many did. I did everything I could to fight for people during that period of time. And I would not ask you to overlook your own suffering and vote for a guy who, at least by his ineffectiveness early in this pandemic, likely contributed to it. But I'm also not going to let you say, therefore, if you don't embrace and internalize my suffering as an identity like me, then you've sold yourself out. If you're not willing to let Kamala Harris trans all the kids, open all the borders, open all the prisons, then you just didn't take what they did to me as seriously as me. You don't get to do that. That's idolatry, actually. We can turn anything into an idol, even our own suffering. You're not the plumb line for literally anything, and neither am I. We've got one. His name's Jesus. He's good at it. When we try to take his place or say we're going to co-pilot there on the plumb line, we're idolaters. Don't do that. You can turn your own suffering into an idol. Well, had a bad experience at a church, so I'm never going to another one. Okay. You ever had a girl break your heart? So I assume then you're on a perpetual vow of celibacy then, right? No, you're an idolater. And so when it comes to actual governing, if you put that back up there, Aaron, real quick, all dissent movements will eventually come to this fork in the road. Are we going to be perpetually aggrieved? Now, this grants no actual power. You're not actually framing any policy that'll stop the suffering of others or vindicate your own. But you're going to feel emotionally and self-righteously empowered. Or are we going to wield actual power by ruling and reigning, which doesn't always come with the emotional affirmation we desire as much as thanklessness, given the calculations required? And Maha, I believe, is now at this crossroads. I am seeing people claim RFK Jr. has sold them out. And this is not just a few ragtag people, but a lot. This guy has been disowned by his own family. His own family. I know a lot of people were made to suffer during COVID. He's earned his stripes. Doesn't mean he's right. But if you know of another path by which you will get the vindication you seek, other than RFK Jr. striking a pact with Donald Trump to acquire and then wield power, can you show it to me? What is it? Do you know what it is, Aaron? What is it? It doesn't exist. That's what it is. There is no other way.
Posting into the void?
Posting into the void, where I will feel emotionally empowered, self-righteously justified. I never have to be wrong. I don't have to make the tough call. When the left does it, we call it victimology. That's what I'm describing. It's just another variation of it. But sooner or later, you have to ask, am I going to be a perpetual victim or a victor? Am I going to be perpetually aggrieved and self-righteous and feast on that emotional empowerment so it becomes my identity? Or am I going to wield power and rule and reign in an imperfect world? Every movement comes to this. And this is now the fork in the road that Maha is at. Any responses to that I should reply to?
This latest post, yeah, we have several. Let's begin maybe with this. Beach Hawk 874 says, remember, almost every one of these Anon accounts were most likely daily listeners that saw you as different than the Bonginos and Hannitys. This is as much more projection of our self-anger for getting taken again from what seemed a sincere ally than to dunk on those who capitulated on principles. There's a marked difference between good analysis and calling balls and strikes, good Trump, bad Trump, if you will, which you do quite well, versus cheerleading and assigning biblical doppelgangers to elected officials and candidates, especially ones you know or are severely flawed.
Do you know any not severely flawed biblical doppelgangers? There's one. There's only one that wasn't severely flawed. Are there any others that were not severely flawed that you are aware of, Aaron?
Who is the prime doppelganger in the Bible you have applied to Trump? Samson.
Samson dies alone. Gets betrayed by his wife.
Did a righteous act at the end.
Does a righteous act at the end. And for that, he's in the Hall of Faith. David stood by and did nothing. What's this guy's name?
Beach Hawk 874.
Yeah, exactly. David stood by and did nothing while his son raped his sister. Nothing. Nearly cost him his entire kingdom. That's just one of David's grave sins. And about him, the scriptures say, a man after God's own heart. There's no other kind of biblical doppelgangers, guys. There's no other kind. John the Baptist connected with Messiah in utero. As he's about to be executed, he sends his last remaining disciple to Jesus to say, hey, can you just confirm for me one more time you're who I thought I would? He baptized him. Saw the Holy Spirit descend like a dove. And he sends his last minute while he's sitting there in prison waiting execution. Hey, go check with my cousin one more time. Just want to make sure here. There's no other kind of biblical doppelgangers. What Bible do you guys read? What movement were you in? And you lost me at comparing Dan Bongino to Sean Hannity. They're not even close together. They're not even close. Not even close. Not even close, man. I typically try to stay out of that internecine stuff when I can, but if you're going to do that, you want some balls and strikes called, I'll call one there. They're not even close to the same figure. Not even close. Dan went, let me tell you about Dan Bongino for a minute. Dan went from doing Facebook Lives in what looked like a spare room in his house to one of the largest platforms on the right. How did he do it? Well, similar to what I did on COVID, he risked all of his credibility on the spying on Trump to the point that at first I thought Dan was wrong. And he turned out to be right about everything. And that made Dan a superstar. He risked everything he had on that story. And he turned out to be right about everything. He deserves everything he's gotten. He took the risk. What's this guy's name?
Battle Hawk 870. Hawk 874.
Battle Hawk 874. What have you risked? You won't even give me a name. Dan Bongino ran for a Senate seat. Dan Bongino risked his entire career on what people thought was a largely obscure conspiracy theory that all turned out to be true. What did you risk? Dan Bongino and Sean Hannity aren't even close to the same. Next.
This is from Elliot Evans. I'm not sure this is so much of a criticism, but he says, yep, pre-COVID, I was very skeptical of these guys, but they changed my mind since they were the only ones that told the truth about lockdowns, mandates, etc. Now they have a chance to do what they always wanted as far as health and medicine. Time to put up or shut up. Maha.
That's essentially my position in total. At some point, you have to be ready to do. There's no way in life that you're going to get anywhere you want without cutting some kind of deal. We all have a boss. I have a boss. I have a board of investors that put up the money for me to originally leave WHO that continue on as essentially my elders. I'm accountable to them. There's things I wanted to do faster. I couldn't do it as fast as I wanted to because I'm accountable to them. And that's the trade-off I made, and it ended up being a very wise one. But that's the trade-off I made so that I essentially would not have other people as bosses who could cancel me because they don't like my opinions. We live in a fallen world, guys. There's always going to have to be calculations. Always. And the moment of prudence and shrewdness comes, is this the moment now? Is this the moment now where I take the credibility that I built up and I cash it in because I've got the leverage to do the right thing? That's exactly what RFK Jr. did. And now we'll see if he was right. I mean, he might sell us out. And guess what I'll do if he does? Aaron, what do you think I'll do if he does? I'll criticize him for selling us out. And then if he doesn't, guess what I'll do? Thank him that he didn't. Because what I see is RFK Jr. parlayed support for Donald Trump into becoming the only vessel by which we would have any reckoning for what was done to us the last few years. the most powerful healthcare policy position in the United States of America. He is now nominated for. Maybe the guy lost his family, a lot of his personal wealth, and many of his friends and associations just to get this deal, and then call Al Borla up over at Pfizer and say, "I'm your Huckleberry." Maybe he did. I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it, guys. Maybe he did. We'll wait and see, but I highly doubt it.
Linford Hurst is next. Where does this language of ruling come from during the dark days of COVID tyranny? I don't remember this language, but now that you have a king and you align with his agenda, now it's in vogue?
Yes. Yeah. Pretty much. That's biblical, man. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. In a biblical worldview, does Caesar have the right to tell me I have to cover my face? No. Does Caesar have the right to tell me I have to offer my body up to be an experimental device for the state? No. Does Caesar have the right to tell me I have to poison myself or my children to be a citizen? No. So did we render those things unto Caesar, Aaron?
No.
No. Yes. That's exactly, you nailed it. Absolutely stuck the landing. When Caesar does what is right, we render it under Caesar, and when he does what is wrong, we don't. I'm good. That's exactly right.
All right. Do you want to go back to this tweet?
Yes.
Neither do I. So you're responding to somebody talking about Trump's...
Anyone pushing double masking, I can't trust.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you say, neither do I.
Yeah. And I said, well, unless later on they were to be one of the few to go on national television and say, don't give these toxic shots to kids. Don't you want to know how someone could go from one extreme to the other? Have you ever changed your mind? Should we not see if she has? Wouldn't she be a powerful ally? She might not be. Let's vet her. Let's let her make her answer questions. But 5 years ago, I thought when Todd was into this stuff, it was, when did we ever talk about this stuff with Todd before COVID? Never, not even off the air. I was like, that's just my quirky buddy, man. It's cool. I got my shot, so I'm not worried about what him and his family do. We all have to start from some baseline, right? Let's find out. All right, let's go to the reply.
So this is from Jim James, quote tweeting Peter Hotez, one of the worst COVID stands.
He's demonic.
Yes.
Yes.
Praising, so Professor Hotez praising the pick of Trump's Surgeon General appointment. And Jim James says she's still receiving praise from one of the most prolific pro-vaxxers on earth. That says it all.
You could be right about that. It could be. I sometimes I'm a little hesitant with, that kind of cross transference. I mean, if Peter Hotez decided that pumpkin spice was great, I'm not, my taste buds agree, But in this venue, you're right that that's a pretty bad sign, probably. All I'm saying is, why don't we just ask her? And if she won't let us ask her, well, then that'll be your answer then too, Aaron, right?
Yep.
Yeah. There's plenty of prominent platforms within MAGA, Metaxas, Charlie Kirk, Bongino. These people have huge followings. They're very loyal to Trump. They were all on the right side in opposition to the COVID stuff and the jab stuff. I was a guest on all their shows during that time, right? Okay. She could go on any of those shows this very day, could she not, and answer these questions and alleviate those concerns, right? Yep. So if she doesn't do that, I guess then you kind of have your answer. But I at least want to give her the chance. That's all.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's very possible RFK Jr. might disappoint all of us. It's very possible he might disappoint all of us and make a lot of us really happy at the same time.
Right.
It's very possible that Dr. Jeanette, and I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, despite the fact I looked at 3 different places this morning and I came up with the pronunciation that I said earlier. It's very possible that Dr. Jeanette is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs as far as masking and vaccines go. It's very possible that she has actually come to Jesus with these things. It's very possible that all of these picks are going to be a mixed bag. Some good, some bad. You know what would probably be all bad? Surgeon General Dick Levine. Okay? And I'm not saying this to say, hey, everything is relative. Does that mean just because we get a mixed bag that we can't hope for something better in the future? No. Does that mean that it's disabling us from actually praising the good stuff and knocking the bad stuff?
Right.
Should that stuff come to pass? No. You have to be nimble. You have to be nimble. And doing the nothing good comes from Nazareth thing, even if there's, as the last one just pointed out,
that's a bad
sign. That's a big red flag. That's a huge red flag.
Yep.
I want, just as I said with Dr. Oz, if he's going to head up CMS, I want him to answer for what he said about this cutting-edge surgery of meatball surgery and, chemical castration for minors that he talked about on a show years ago. These people have things to answer for sure. But I want them to have the chance to answer for them before we make sweeping proclamations or judgments.
So, speaking of sweeping proclamations and judgments, we've got election data from 2024. Do they point to fraud in 2020 or not? We'll get into that in the overtime today. For the rest of you, Romans 8:28.